Hi, this is Will, and today we're going to take a little look at this little elevator scene, and this is what they call elevator basic. Now, there's not too much that's basic about it because it is a pretty tough little program to write. But what we have is we have this, I don't know, it's kind of a conveyor system, but we have three levels. This we call level 0, this is level 1 and level 2. And basically packages come in over here at the green arrow going down, and then we remove them at the red arrow going up, the remover circuit. And basically the way we have it set up to work right now is that each package will go to the next available, well, each package will start out, will go with layer 0, so it'll go straight through. And then we go to the second package will go to layer 1. So what we have to do is we have to bring it onto this area right here, between this section and this section over here is kind of like an elevator section. And so we can lift it up to this level here, and then we can put it on the conveyor, and then we can run it over here, and then we can bring up the right side elevator to grab the package, and then bring it down, and then it can remove the package over here. And likewise, the third layer is the same thing. Is the third package will go up to, I guess we call this level 2, but the third package will go up, go across here, and then be retrieved by the right side elevator, and then go out the remover circuit. So if we look at this, and what I'm going to do is take it and put in the run mode. This is the run mode, this is a pause button, this is a reset button, and this is a clock where we can change the speed. And while we're taking a look at some of the initial stuff, we'll probably want to slow it down to show some detail. So the first thing you can do is go into view and knock all the tags, and all these orange circles inside circles are the sensors. All the green circles are actuators. So all the actuators when we're starting off are off. Now a lot of these sensors are turned on because they're retroreflectors. And you can tell, if I can kind of zoom in on this one point, the gold means it's high. So if we look at entry left, we would see that at entry left is high, because that's gold. And there's at entry, and these sensors are really close together, but they kind of do serve different purposes, and we'll kind of show that. But one of the things that you can start by taking a look at what the program we need to run is, when you're just hooked up like this, you can force your signals to show you what happens with the system, and then you can figure out how to write your code. So the first thing we might want to do is we want to drop an emitter, which drops it right here. It drops a pallet. Now this can have boxes, it can have these little lids, so they have different items on there. And just to show you this reset, if I reset it, well, I'll release the emitter, and then I'll release or reset it, and it goes away. So, and again, what you can do is you force things on by clicking on the circle, and then you get rid of the emitter. If it's turned on, it'll just keep putting boxes on there. So if we release it and then we reset it, another box won't appear. And that's kind of what we want to do. So we can start out by getting one box there, turning off our signal, and then we can look at right here was we have an entry conveyor. And then if we go a little further, well, we have this load left signal, and this is kind of like the load conveyor. So what we need to do at first is and I'm going to make sure it's at half speed so we can take a look at this. We'll turn on the entry conveyor, and right about when it gets to at entry left, I'm going to pause it. So entry conveyor and pause about here. So here what we've done is we've got an at entry sensor went from high to low, but we haven't quite got at the at entry left sensor, and you can see that the sensor is here and the pallet hasn't quite gotten there. Now what we're going to do is turn it on for, at this point we've got the load conveyor here, and what we need to do is load left because we want to load it, and all we want to do is load it. We don't ever want to unload it. So loading is going from, as you're looking at it, from left to right. Unloading would be from right to left. And so all we want to do is keep going in this direction towards the top of the screen. So we're going to keep on the entry conveyor, and then we're going to turn on the load left. And again, I'm going to use the pause button. I'm going to unpause it. And then when the pallet clears the at entry left signal, so it's going to go from high to low and then back to high when the pallet clears. When it goes low, that's when the front edge, is in front of the sensor. So there it's turned on, and here it turns off. Now I stopped it there because this is the elevator section right here, and this is, if we want it to go up to the other levels, we have to clear this sensor so that the pallet is clearly, and you can see a little, and maybe I can zoom in a little closer, but you can see this little section right here. The section right here over here is the elevator section. That's the section that rises and goes up and comes down. And so if we wanted to go up to the other levels, we have to stop it at about this point. And those are the signals that you need. So right now we can turn off the entry conveyor. We don't need it anymore. And we're going to turn on the load conveyor. And then when the pallet gets to this sensor here, which is at exit left, what we're going to do is we're going to turn on, and you can see them, there's conveyor 0, conveyor 1, and conveyor 2. So when I see that go from gold to white, I'm going to turn on the entry conveyor 0. So let's take a look at this. Conveyor 0. And I can stop it now, and I can turn off the load left. And over here we have the same type of load conveyor for the right elevator that goes up and down. So when it gets to about that point, I'm going to pause it again and turn on the load right. So when it's at entry right about there, we can turn on load right, and that will move it through this position here. And again, if we want it to go up, we would stop it here when the at entry right signal goes back high. But what we have right now is we also have, if I can control this, you'd think by now I'd know how. This is the exit conveyor, and then there's the remover. So we're going to, as soon as at exit right goes from high to low, and there it just went, what we're going to do is, well, we can turn off the conveyor 0, we don't need it anymore, and we can turn off the turn on the exit conveyor, and that'll turn on this section right here. And you can see it goes blue because we forced it on. And what we're going to do is pause it again when we're at exit. Well, stopped a little short, but that's all right, because right now all we have to do is we're going to keep at exit on, but we're going to turn on the remover circuit. Okay, so the remover circuit is on, so when we turn it back on, so now we have load right forced on, we've got exit conveyor forced on and remover circuit forced on. So what's going to happen is when it gets into this box that's this dashed area, the remover circuit's going to magically make it disappear, the pallet. Okay, and so that's what we do for the layer 0. Now, and let me release these signals. Now, for the other layers, it becomes a bit more complicated. It's the same thing, but what we have to do is we have to stop it, as we were showing on here, so that we can move up to the level that we need and then come back down. And so actually, let me just pause this for a second. I want to show some timing diagrams for the system. Okay, so what I have here are two timing diagrams, and they're kind of similar, but this one is for layer 0 when we're going straight through. So what we have is we have an emitter pulse, and as soon as we get that emitter, we're going to turn on the entry conveyor. And then we get this at entry left signal. And when the leading edge of it comes through, our signal goes from high to low, and that's when we turn on the load left signal. When the signal goes high, again, that's when we go back and we turn off our entry conveyor. And we leave the load left on until we get the trailing edge of the at exit left. Now, the leading edge of at exit left also turns on our conveyor. And the way these timing diagrams, the way I draw them, is I put arrows on the signal, and again, the up arrow is when we have the trailing edge, because the signal, well, the down arrow is the leading edge of the pallet, and that's when the signal goes, for the retroreflector, goes from high to low, and then the trailing edge is when it goes back from low to high. So the trailing edge is, if you think of this as time, it's later in time that happens. And then we just have the same thing for when we're at the right entry. We load right on the leading edge of when it's at the entry right, and then when it's at the trailing edges, we turn off the conveyor. And then the same thing with when we're at exit right is when we turn on the exit conveyor. And then in here is also when we turn on the remover. And for the remover, it's just the opposite of the at exit signal. So when we get to the at exit, the sensor, that's when we turn on the remover signal, and it's just the inverse of that. So that's a quick little thing. Now the last thing is to keep going as soon as it gets removed. So as soon as the remover finishes, we have this little signal here, which it's hard to read, but it says next box. And we set that up with a pulse timer, and all we need for that pulse timer is, I have it set up as 250 milliseconds, and it's a pulse after the remover signal goes low. Now, this is for level 1 and 2, and this is a bit more complicated, because what you have is, this is the load left signal, and I've left out some of these early signals because they're all the same. But what happens is, when you get into the at entry left, you have to stop it like we originally show, and then what you have to do is you have to lift up to the proper level. And when it gets at that level, then you have to hit the load left again to get it on the conveyor. And again, let's see, right here is when we're turning on our conveyor. So we're kind of doing the load left and turning on the conveyor at about the same time. Now it goes all the way down the conveyor, and again it stops the conveyor because the right side elevator might not be at the proper level, and it won't be in the way I have it set up. So what we have to do is we have to wait and we have to pause until we get to this this signal, which is at level. Once we get at level, what we can do is we can turn on the conveyor again, and then we can also turn on the load right signals. So that pushes it onto, once the elevator is at the right signal, then we can push it onto the load elevator cart. And then we go down, and it's the same thing with the other stuff. Now, the way we have it set up in the program is when we're just doing mode 0 is what we call it when we're loading level 0, and then we have mode 1 is level 1, and mode 2 is level 2, and then we have mode 4 is controlling the right side elevator when it's moving downwards. We originally had a mode 3, but it didn't work out, so we got rid of it. So there is no mode 3. And you know, when we're doing this, we kind of have two separate things. So we're looking at it and we're saying, are we in mode 0? Because then we're doing this timing diagram. And then we ask the question, are we not in mode 0? And, you know, levels 1 and 2 are exactly the same, except, you know, when we have the signal that says, are we at the right level? Then we have to make the distinction between levels 1 and 2. So we'll I'll stop it here for a quick break, and then we'll take a look at the actual code that we use. And we're using the Siemens S7-1200. But again, what we have we're implementing this with the PLC simulator. So you do not have to actually have the PLC to do this program. Or even attempt this program. And the PLC simulator is, you know, the two good things here are PLC simulator. I think you can get a copy of a free trial of the Siemens software for 3 weeks. Now you can also get a free copy or free trial. It's not a free copy. Let's be clear about that. But a free trial of the Factory I/O for 4 weeks. So this one's a pretty heady type of program to write, so you might try one of the simpler ones that we've recorded a while back. But anyway, I'm going to stop it here and we can take a look at the way the code is implemented. Okay, so this is the Siemens PLC program, and up here is, again, this is the thing, or this is a function block that you get from Factory I/O that allows the Factory I/O to talk to the Siemens PLC simulator. And, you know, it has a little definitions in here, and it just makes things work. So you really don't have to do anything other than to grab that function block, and they have a tutorial on how to work with the Siemens PLCs in general, but also how to set it up for the PLC Sim. You need this block if you want to run with PLC Sim. If you have a PLC, if you happen to have one, you don't need this block. This network here is all these definitions of edge triggers. And for instance, if we look at this, so this signal is when it gets to the add entry, and the signal goes from, you know, high to low because it's retro reflector, which means that this is the leading edge of the palette because it's going from high to low. So we give that an entry pulse, and I use pulses for all these signals that I need to trip things. And likewise, this one's a P, which means it's a positive trigger, which means it's going from low to high, which means that this is for that signal at entry left, but this is the positive or the trailing edge of it. So if you wanted to see, well, you know, if you look in the program and you see a signal that's entry left pulse, you know, one of the things that you can do and you should do is you can right click on it and go to these cross references, and this will tell you everywhere that that signal is used. So what we can, you know, we know that here it's where we define the triggers, and then we say, okay, that signal is used in our start stop logic here, and I don't know why it did that, but you can see what it does is this is a regular CLN circuit, and this is what turns off the entry conveyor. So when that signal goes high, the at entry signal goes high, we turn off the entry conveyor. So, you know, this cross-reference is a good way, and you can go backwards and you can say, well, I wonder what sensor sets off this signal. You can go back to cross-references, and you know that all the pulses are set up in the define edge triggers. So you can go in there and you can say that, where is it? Okay, so it's at entry left. And you can go into your program here, and your at entry left is right here. It's this, it's actually, the at entry signal is this first sensor, and the at entry left is the second sensor right here. So, you know, you can work your way through and figure out, that's what I have to do all the time when I put these pulses or these triggers in. But triggers are a good way to just start and stop things, and you know, it's a pretty solid approach to do that. So, you know, we've got a ton of these triggers, and there's too many to go by, and you don't necessarily need all of them. But if we go through and we have our regular start-stop circuitry, you know, we have the emitter, and we create the first emitter with the start push button, and then that'll give you your very first emitter, and then from that point on we just use this next box to create the emitter signal. And here's our entry conveyor, and we already discussed this. Now this load left, this is what loads it onto the first, I guess, elevator section on the left hand side. And what we do is, you know, we have this section for when it's not equal, when mode is not equal to 0, which means we're going up. So when we go up to level 1 or level 2, we have to use that to you know, turn on our conveyor. This one actually turns on our conveyor when we get to the proper level. So if we're at level 1 or at level 2, then we're going to push it onto the conveyor at that level. And then we have the circuitry that turns it off. So if we are at level 0, so we have the equal sign here, then it's when we have the entry 0 pulse, which is the pulse that the pallet generates when it's at the end of the conveyor 0. And then when we're not at level 0, we have the same thing for when we push it onto the conveyor. So when we're pushing it for the second time, so we load it onto the load left conveyor, this is what, you know, pushes it off the load left conveyor, or load left conveyor onto the actual conveyor at that level. And this is when it's fully on the conveyor, and then it can turn off that signal. And here's the conveyor controls, and again, we're doing everything based on comparison. So we need to know if we're on mode 0, which means level 0, or if we're on mode 1, this is when we're coming down, because the conveyor, and you'll be able to watch this when we turn on the program. It's, you know, kind of complicated to explain it in words, but what happens is when it's at that level 1, we move the conveyor and we bring it to the end of the conveyor, and then we have to stop it because the elevator isn't at the right level yet. So we stop it there for temporarily, and then we start it again when we're at the right level. And it's the same with the second conveyor. And these are our signals to know whether we're at the right level. And we're going to explain that when we're looking at the actual, well, we can take a look at it right now. So each of these levels, they have at left low and at left high signal. And it's the same for the right hand side, by the way. But if we look at this, on the back hand side, if we look at level 1, there's these two sensors right about here, and we have to put them at an angle. But this is at left high one and at left low one. And these are two sensors here, and the elevator has to be positioned so that both of these triggers are on to say that we're at the proper level. And we need both of those on so that the pallet makes a good smooth transfer from the elevator section to the conveyor section. So these right now are both low, but if it were at the right height, then these would be both high, and then we could make a nice smooth transfer, and that's what we want onto the conveyor. So that's what these three things do. And this just, when they both get for level 1 and level 2, because level 0 we don't do any adjustments with the the elevator conveyor. It's just at the right height anyway. So we send out this little trigger, and this trigger is different than the other edge triggers because those are kind of for input signals. This one evaluates everything before it. So it has to be at mode 1, it has to be at low level, it has to be at high level, and then we'll send out a pulse, and that'll tell us when we need to start transferring stuff. And okay, so this is right lift control, and it's basically kind of the same thing, that we have to be at the right height to be able to transfer anything. And this is the left control mode. It's kind of the same deal, and again we're looking for whether it's at level 0 or not at level 0, which means level 1 or 2. And here's kind of one of the, well, I'll have to go back to the factory I/O. So when you're lifting things on the factory when you're lifting the elevator section on the factory I/O, there are actually 3 signals that you can use for lifting or going up or down. There's a lift up, which is kind of lifting at full speed. Then there's lift slow, and then there's lift down. Now the way you have to do it, and what we were just talking about, is how you have to get in with both sensors here. If you turn on lift up, and here's lift up, I'll force it on and I'll unpause it. You can see that it goes at a fairly good speed, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to get it right here. So let me bring it a little closer. So when you get close to this position, you also have to turn on lift slow, or left slow, and then it slows down, and then when both those signals turn on, which is right about here, I think I missed it a little bit, but let's see. Okay, so I got the high position, but I missed the low position, and that means, and you can see it right here because I was manually doing it, they aren't even. So when we're talking about they both have to be high, you have to do that. That's why in the actual program we have that one shot in there that'll give us a trigger pulse that tells us exactly when we're at the right height, and then we can stop it immediately. We can stop it on that that scan, and that's really important. And you have to use the left up and left slow in combination to get it to the right level, because if you don't use the left slow, you will always overshoot. I mean, even when I was using it just now and I was kind of trying to eyeball it, I didn't get it at the right position. So the odd thing about this is when you're going up, you have to use, you can use left up to get you 90% of the way, but then you have to turn on the left slow to get you to the right position. And that's kind of all I'm saying here. But the thing of it is, when you go down, I can turn on just the left down, and I'll unpause it here. And I don't really have to slow it. It's always going to stop in the right position. So that's kind of peculiar, and let me try to zoom in here. And you can see that it is at the exact right height. So when you're going up, you need to use the up signal, and then to get you 90% of the way, and then you have to use the slow position to get you into the exact position. But when you're going down, you can go down at full speed, which is not quite sure I understand that, but that's the way it is. So what we do here, one of the things with the Siemens PLCs that you don't see in a lot of other PLCs is they have this thing, it's the timer pulse. And this will, no matter how long of a signal you put on the input, so long as it's high, so long as it's in mode 1, and so long as it's in lift enable, it's going to send out a pulse. Now this pulse, because this is for level 1, happens to be 3.5 seconds long. For level 2, it happens to be 7.4 seconds. And it will send out that pulse no matter what is on the input. We can set this high for one scan and it's going to put out 3.5 second pulse, or we can set this high forever and it's going to send out just one 3.5 second pulse. And I'm sure everyone's familiar with a T-on pulse. You couldn't strobe a T-on timer for just one scan, because it'll start counting but then it'll immediately stop and reset. So these are pretty handy, and these are pretty predictable in how long they're going to do. So what we do, or what I've got here, is if we're going to level 1, it's going to be fast for 3.5 seconds, and then afterwards, when we've timed out on that, then we're going to go slow for the rest of the time. So, when the timer is done, we're going to go slow. And that's the way we do it. Now, when we're going down, all we say is, well, let's go down at full speed. And it's pretty much the same concept for going for the right lift enable. So when we're not in 1, we enable it. Now the only difference is when we're going down is we put it into this mode 4, and we have to do that for just control reasons. And again, we have the same type of thing. When we're going down, it's 3.5 seconds, and then it's 7.5 seconds for when we're at the higher level. And it's the same for the right up signals, the slow signal, and the down signal. So when we're going, when we're going up, we have to use both the right up and the right slow signals. When we're going down, we're just using the right down signal. And then there's just the exit conveyor and remover control. And so again, it's set up so that it's either in mode 0, which is kind of the straight through area, and then when we're mode 4 is when we're taking the elevator and going down. And we have to kind of distinguish between when we're going up or when we're going down, because that's when we're going down and we get into position is when we have to exit the conveyor system, as opposed to when we're going up, we have to stop it and go up, and we don't control any of the output, exit, conveyor, and you can see this is the exit conveyor when we're in either mode 0 or mode 4, and that's the only time we use it. And then the remover circuit is there. Now the last thing is, in the next box, it's just when we're done with the remover circuit, we just send out the 250 millisecond pulse. This other thing we have here is when we go past the remover, we have a counter that just counts things, and then we have a modulus 3 counter, which basically it takes whatever your count value is and divides by 3. and whatever remainder you have turns out to be your mode. And so what happens is, if we process 6 boxes, if we divide 6 by 3, we have a remainder of 0, which means we'll be on level 0. If the count was 7, we'd have a remainder of 1, which means we go up to level 1. And, you know, if we had a count of 8, it'd be level 2. And that's, so we sequence between each of the levels. And that's the way we do it. And then we have some start lamp, stop lamp, and then we have these warning lamps. And the only warning lamp is if we're either going up or down. And that's when we turn on the warning lamp. So I'm going to pause it for a second. We can take a quick look at the way the system operates now. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to do is I want to show everybody how to turn on the PLC Sim, because last time I had the this screen minimized and it didn't look too good. So when you get into this, there's a little tab up here and it's called Online. And if you go into Online, you can go into Simulation, and if you move over with Simulation, you can say Start. And now it's going to say that, you know, if you're doing the simulation, you can't talk to the PLC if you had one. So we're going to say OK. And then it loads, well, it tries to load it in a somewhat similar fashion to what it does with the actual PLC. What it first does is it creates this little simulated PLC, and you can see it's in the stop mode over here. And I'm not even sure how I can really do this with, well, maybe I can do this with this hiding behind it. But it takes a little while to do this. And basically you go through a loading process, and I can't really move this out of the way, but maybe this will work. And this does take a little while to get into the loading position to where it's trying to hook up to it. And you can see, in the way it's set up, you can't see the full IP address, but it says it's in the stop mode. This goes between amber and green. When it's amber like this, it is in the stop mode. But this does have our IP address for the PLC. And right here it's saying it's compiling the configuration. And so even though it's taking a while, it's kind of doing its thing. And right now it's saying everything looks good, and we're going to load it to the device. And again, this may take some time. And you know, even though when we're actually going to operate the system, it doesn't seem that much slower, but when it's doing these functions like just trying to, and here it says caution start modules, and it has this no action, but if we click in here, it also has start module. And if you look over here, when we click on the start module, this thing will turn, it'll start blinking from amber to green, and that means that our module is actually being started up. And you can see it starting to blink. And now we should be in the run mode. Now, what I do have to do is I have to go in here. The program is loaded into the simulator, but what I have to do is I have to go online, and then I should see a bunch of green circles fill up this column over here, and that means that everything is in good shape. And these will turn to green just like that guy. And there'll be a number of them. And now what I have to do is I have to turn this monitoring on off. I have to turn this on. Now that's going to put, you can see which ones are on and which ones are off, and pretty much everything is off to start with. And by the way, I should say we also use a startup block here. And this startup block is the Siemens PLCs, they maintain the output even when you're like changing the program. So if you go offline to make a little change to the program and then go back online, the outputs will still be in the same condition that they were. So we have this little startup block, and what we do is every time that we go from run to stop and then back to run, we put the outputs in a known condition. So this is saying that we're resetting, and it looks like it's really hard to read, but we're resetting the outputs starting with the first output and resetting up to the next 28 outputs. That's what that says. And then it also says we're starting with our mode at 0, and the only one that we're setting is the stop lamp. So when we get into the right condition, the only thing we should see is the stop lamp turned on. So let me try to move that, and you can see what this looks like. And here is the actual IP address that we have for our PLC. So maybe I'll just put him on top of that guy. So now we're pretty much ready to go, except the last thing we have to do is we have to go in here into the drivers. And this says it's the actual Siemens PLC. What we want to have is PLC Sim. And now if we connect up, and this will take a little while too, so the software does seem slower than if you had actual hardware. And when it does connect, we should see some green circle with a check mark in it over here. And this one is fairly complex program, and especially with trying to, if you have that timer pulse thing, you are going to have to, and so we're online, and now you can see that all these are turned off, and that's because of that initial block that I just showed you, except for the stoplight. You want to make sure that when you're stopping, or starting and stopping and changing code, that when you're starting it again, that you're in this condition. Otherwise, it's not going to be that great. So you can see we're on stoplight. If we turn it on, and we're still at half speed, so I should change it to full speed. So you can see it goes up, and then it slows down for the last little bit. So now it goes across, and you can see that the one on the right hand side is trying to meet it, but it doesn't guarantee that it's not quite right. So that's why we have to stop it at the end there, and you'll be able to see that. Let me try to angle it a little bit so you can take a better look. This will go up to the 3rd floor. And again, as soon as this gets onto the conveyor, as soon as the pallet is fully onto the conveyor, the right-hand side will start to move up to try to retrieve it. Now, you can actually write the program, so because as soon as you, well, right now you know that we're just alternating levels, so you can kind of raise the right-hand side at the same, you can raise the right elevator at the same time as the left elevator, so then you can catch the pallet as it's coming across. Now this one's a 0, so this one's just going straight across. And again, one of the things you can see is when the pallet disappears and it's fully gone is when the next emitter happens. Because again, we do that little pulse timer after the remover is turned off. And again, this will go up, when the pallet is fully on here, this guy will rise up to try to meet it. Now this is beginning to be a pretty long video, so I just want to, and maybe I'll make a quick little part 2. So we're just alternating between different levels, and I mean that's a pretty good task and a pretty good chore, but I want to point out something. So we have these green guys here. So we actually have 3 options. We have these green lids, I guess they're called. Then we also have blue lids, and then we also have regular boxes that come across here. So one of the things that we can do, and I guess I'll show you, is I guess I'll make a shorter video, but we can put in a little visual sensor that can tell colors. And so what we can do is we can say, instead of our modulus counter at the end, what we can do is we can put in a little visual system, and we can have like our boxes go straight across. We can have, and I don't know how we're going to set it up exactly, but we can have the blue ones go on maybe level 1 and all the green ones go on level 2. So now we've kind of sorted it in a more, well, you know, this is kind of just arbitrary. It's like what package number are you? And the way we're doing it now, we just alternate between levels. But now we can say, okay, all boxes will go on level 0, all blue things will go on level 1, and all green things will go on level 2. And that kind of makes more sense. So I think, because we're already over 45 minutes on this one, is I'll stop it here, and then I'll start the next video from like right about here where we're pretty much got nothing. And then, you know, one of the things I can show you is how you kind of set up if you want a special thing. So the first thing that we'll show you is we have to go between run and edit mode. So right now we're in run mode. If I unclick it, now we're in edit mode, and this palette shows up, and you know, we can put whatever we need on there. So with that, we'll kind of pick it up and we'll add in the visual you know, the visual sensor along with bracketry to hold it, and we'll modify the program just a little bit, and I guarantee it'll be a shorter video. So thank you. Good luck with this one. This one's kind of tough.